Hi, I'm Ella Feingold. I'm an orchestrator, and I hope you're doing really well. Today we are going to continue part 2 of, I'm sure, many parts of From MIDI to the Orchestra. This cue is from a film that just came out called Boxing Day. It's a Christmas rom-com in London. It takes place in London. And the composer James Poyser was kind enough to allow me to share my orchestrations with you, which was very generous of him. So to get started, let's just have a listen to the cue. It's very short. I think it's like 17 seconds. Cool. Okay. I like this cue. That undulating part sort of reminds me of like Debussy, maybe something he would have written. I'm going to have some cold brew here. Is there anything better than cold brew and orchestrating? I'm sure there is, but it's one of my favorite things to do. So on the left here, we see sketch. This is what was given to me from the orchestrator. And on the right is my orchestration. So, as always, I like to sort of think about why for everything and why not. And, you know, forgive me if I'm being a little long-winded, but I think having this sort of childlike curiosity with these things and why did they do this? Okay, I think I figured that out. Why didn't they do this? And I'm going to show you one place of a why didn't I, and I should have, but I don't, I can't think of everything as much as I try. So I'm going to sort of do a first pass of the literal things that I did in the orchestration, and then I'm going to do a pass of the things where it required a little more imagination and refinement and whatever. I would like to just say as a disclaimer that if you are working for someone else and you're orchestrating someone else's music, it's really important to have a conversation with them in the beginning, if that's even possible, if they have the time, to just have a quick chat about what their expectations are from you. Are they looking for you to just be literal and transfer the MIDI into the score page and simply decide on, dynamics and phrasing and maybe some articulations? Or are they looking for you to fill textures out and to refine things and to add octaves? And we could get into a discussion about what orchestration is and what it isn't. And I guess I would just say you need to have a sense of what the composer is expecting from you. What I did here on this page, while I think it's incredibly refined and it's perfect for what the scene needed, this could also get you fired. So I don't want to... I want to be very poetic with things and talk about all of these colors, but I also want to be very realistic that when you work for somebody else, these could be things you're praised for, and these could also be things that you're fired over. So I just want to put that out there, that you need to have a conversation about what the composer's expectations are. With James, we've worked together for many years. When I was doing a lot of guitar playing, we played with Jay-Z together and a lot of different artists, and we're friends and we have a great working relationship. And he really wanted to just have me do whatever I heard, and if that means filling in textures and whatnot. So I was given that permission. So I just want to offer that as a disclaimer, because I don't want people getting fired from watching these videos and just thinking, where do they get a load of this? Where do they get a load of that? Because that very thing could get you fired. So have a conversation and find out what they need of you. Okay, now that that disclaimer is out of the way. So this scene is in London. It's on a street. I think it's in front of a barber shop or a beauty salon. There's cars passing by. It's cold. It's airy. It's windy. It's a little bit noisy. So the music and the orchestration should reflect that. So this was delivered in the flute. And so to talk about why and why not, why was it in the flute? It was in the flute, I think, and I think it was a perfect color because the flute can have a cold, silvery-like quality, and there's breath to it, and to me that breath sort of evokes outside and the wind and the coldness. So I think that the composer chose a perfect color for the scene with the flute, and especially in this register. Let's talk about why not. So I have an oboe, an English horn, 2 clarinets. I actually also have a bass clarinet available to me, and 1 bassoon. Why not the oboe? Well, I think the oboe would be too expressive. I think the English horn as well would be a little too expressive for this scene. Why not the clarinet? I think the clarinet, that's sort of the closest to the flute. I think the clarinet would be a little too neutral here. And as I mentioned, it needs the airiness of the flute. Okay. Why not the bassoon? I mean, obviously the bassoon is already doing something, but obviously it's out of range. So those are the why nots. So I was quite literal here. I put it into the flute. I marked it as solo so they understand what their role is. I marked it as simplice, just sort of simply, doesn't need to be crazy expressively. I put a tenuto on the 3rd beat because I just wanted a little more stress. And I shaped the phrase a little bit here. I had them crescendo right into where everyone else comes in, and they sort of diminuendo as everyone else sort of rises up and comes down. So those were decisions I made for the flute. Okay, what else was given to me? The bassoon. So I chose to put this in tenor clef. It's perfectly sight readable in bass clef, but I just thought it would look better in the score and to the player in tenor clef. And you'll notice because it has this kind of rising and falling sound, which was in the mock-up, I reflected that with hairpins. So, moving down the line, vibraphone, and you can see here, I gave it to the vibes. Now, what are some of the things that I did? I asked for softest mallets. I didn't want to have any attack. I wanted a haze. And I asked for motor on the slowest setting and with the pedal down. So this is just resonance and sonorous fluid. Okay. Next was the harp, and also quite literal. I put in harp pedaling, but if you look close, my notation here looks different. And let's kind of go on a tangent a little bit about the harp. So in the original sketch, you see that it's EA and GC, and it sort of goes and repeats itself over and over again. And most orchestrators probably would have copy and pasted that in and moved on. But I know that this needs to ring and be really airy. So if a harpist were to re-articulate these notes over and over again, what's happening, if you can imagine playing the harp, is if you're re-articulating the same notes over and over again, you're also canceling the ring. And so what I wanted to do was think idiomatically for the harp. And so I chose to exploit the fact that there are enharmonics in the harp. And I just would encourage you to do that in your orchestration. So if you notice, there's a B sharp, and then there's a C natural here. These are all G's because I don't have any enharmonic equivalents. And if you'll notice, there's an E here and an F flat, and these pitches sound the same. So by having them attack different notes of the same pitch, I'm just getting more resonance. And so I would, encourage you to look for those things when it's a simple gesture that repeats and you really want things ringing. Now to go a little bit further down the harp tangent, I'll put a link in the description below, but there are some wonderful books by Sarah Bulin. I believe she was or is the principal harpist with Chicago Symphony. And these books are harp repertoire. There's 2 volumes. They're being sold, I believe, by Vanderbilt Music. But what she does is she takes the repertoire and actually makes it more harp friendly and fixing composer mistakes by putting in different pedaling, by splitting the hands out differently. And by studying those books, you'll get a sense of where composers got things wrong and what a harpist is looking to do to make a part more playable. For some people, the harp can be incredibly overwhelming. It can be like the wild, wild west, and they don't know how do you split the hands out, which notes go in which hand, how many notes do I put in this hand, harpists only play with 4 fingers, but, do I do 4 notes and then 2 here? Do I do 3 here and 3 here? So studying Sarah's book and also studying harp music written by harpists will give you a really, really good sense of how the hands are split out. There's another amazing book by Yolanda, I think it's Kononassis, I'm pronouncing her name wrong. I'll also link that in the description. So that's something you definitely want to spend a lot of time with, is harp, and really understanding it, understanding the pedaling, understanding when do they want to change pedals. Do they want the pedal change to occur right before this gesture? I mean, supposing that there was a lot of music before this. Do they want it right before so they have a sense of where they are harmonically? Do they want it as early as possible so that the pedals are already prepared? And the answer is some do. Some want to change the pedals as quickly as possible. Some want it right before the beat so that they have a sense of maybe where they are harmonically. Every harpist has a different preference with pedal indications. A lot of harpists don't trust orchestrators and composers and ask, please don't put in any harp pedaling. Let us do that. So there's 3 different schools of thought. So sometimes, know who you're writing for and know what the harpist would like. So enough of the harp rant. So back to the page here. So, cold brew break. So what else is going on here? We've got a held D, and we have this undulation that's happening in the harp and the vibraphone in violin 2. Okay, so I was somewhat literal with this. I put this in violin 2 rather than violin 1. I put this as a natural harmonic, not an artificial. I chose the natural harmonic because it's a little more unstable. You get what you get with intonation, and that's also why a lot of studio players, if you write a natural harmonic, sometimes they're just gonna fake it and do an artificial, or they may even do a sort of a fake harmonic, which would be like a soupçon, kind of very slow bow, dead tone, quasi-harmonic kind of color. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So I was quite literal with this. I just turned this into a harmonic. So why? Why did I do that? I did that because they're outside and there's a little bit of air and wind, and so I wanted to make things a little bit less in focus, and I feel that by exploiting harmonics that it blurs the line a little bit. It blurs the color, you know, it dulls the edges a little bit. I also did that because there is this happening here, and I wanted that to feel a little more in focus for certain instruments. Although of course with the harp pedal down, that of course blurs things. So the last thing was, this was in violin 2, and I was quite literal with this. I chose to put it in violin 1. So that was what I was delivered. Let's kind of hyper focus here on the strings and what else is happening. So I put a cymbal swell here. I called for a medium cymbal, and I said almost imperceptible. I just wanted to evoke a little bit of wind. The percussionist recorded at home, so if this was something the composer didn't like, they had the option to just simply mute it. Okay, now let's get a little bit deeper here in the strings, and then we'll go to the woodwinds. So I'm just going to zoom in more. So I have a natural harmonic here. It's consord, sul tasto, flautando. So they're playing, you know, on the fingerboard, and flautando is like a very fast, airy, you know, a very light bow. It gives a flute-like color. I took the same type of gesture and I asked for toneless bow noise, bow directly on bridge, quasi-breath noises. So this is just air coloring the harmonic. I put 6 people out of 8 on this, okay? And to refine it even more, because I'm extra, I put the last desk of celli doing this harmonic that sounds in unison here with the violin. They're doing consord. They're also doing sul tasto, flautando. So remember, we have artificial harmonics, but we also have a harmonic with the mute on. We also have a harmonic sul tasto, and we also have a harmonic sul pont. Of course, a harmonic already has an airy sort of sound, and so sometimes do we need sul pont? Sometimes no. Sometimes you do. So just something to consider, because a lot of people write harmonic and stop there. And in the basses, I did the breath noise as well. So looking here, which was in the seconds, I put this in consord, sul tasto, flautando, fine. I chose to put the first desk of violi with it, just something I wanted to try. I thought it would be a little bit of a thicker sound, and wanted to try it. It sounded great. I also took let's see here. Yeah, I took 2 desks of celli, and what I had them do was pulse some of these pitches, because it has this or if I just play this here, excuse the playback. So I wanted to stress the downbeats. So I took those pitches and wrote them as harmonics so that there's a little bit of a pulse. So that wasn't delivered, but it's implied in the music. And then let's take a look at the woodwinds. So this is what was delivered in the harp, in the bassoon. By the way, on a little bit of a side note, for those that maybe typically only write for the bassoon in the bass clef, I would encourage you to score read Debussy's Péléas et Mélisande. Debussy pretty much has the bassoon in the tenor clef the whole time. It's wonderful how high he writes for the bassoon, and how he exploits sort of that range of the bassoon, the tenderness of it. So I'd love to see more people check out that score and not just typecast the bassoon as something low inside the bass clef and towards the bottom. It really can come alive on that on this this A right here in bass clef. So just a little side thing. So what else did I do here? I chose to put some harmony into the English horn. Why the English horn? Because it blends nicely with the bassoon, and that harmony is also in the violins. So let's hear what that sounds like. Fine. So now I zoomed in a little bit deeper, and I chose to do a sort of John Adams technique where I'm taking the harmony and I'm having them oscillate notes so I can get a sort of pulsing legato sound rather than having them hold one note throughout the bar. So if you look here, it's going E, A in one part, and the other part is doing, retrograde, doing A, E. So if I did E on the bottom in clarinet 2 and A on top on clarinet 1, you would get one, steady sound, which is fine, but because this is moving and rising up and coming down, I wanted to have them oscillate notes. And to give you a rough sense of what that sounds like, it's this. So it's a subtle color. You can hear the attacks, and I got that from score studying. Where did I get that from? John Adams, Common Tones in Simple Time, or is it Simple Tones in Common Time? Harmonie Lera. I mean, that's everywhere. That's why we score study. We get ideas. We go hunting for textures. We see how things are balanced. And so that's where I got, some of these techniques from, is John Adams. I made a PDF called String Undulation, where I sort of break out all of these different cells that you can do. And a lot of people have asked me to make it available, so I made it for sale on my website for a really fair, small fee, and I'll put that in the description below. But that's a bunch of cells to give you ideas of how you can take something that's static and create a little bit of motion from it. It's called String Undulation, but depending on the tempo, it absolutely works for woodwinds as well. So that's basically everything here in the orchestration that I can sort of think of. So we've got something that's quite literal here, and then some stuff that's literal, some things that require imagination, some things that are incredibly idiomatic. I'd almost, offer as a recipe to do what's given. Ask yourself, let's say the composer delivered it in the oboe. So think about a very common, a complementary or something close to the sonority of what they wrote. So they wrote it in the oboe. Is it best in the oboe? Yeah, okay, you're done. Does it get a little too low for the oboe? And would it be better in the cor anglais? Yes, okay, fine. So I'd encourage you to just think about some of those things. Don't just be literal and set it into the page. Just think, does this work? This is advice, of course, for beginning orchestrators. And also, to make the orchestration look really refined in the page. And we're not just being fancy to make it look cool on the page. I mean, a player is reading this. And so think about the player. Think about, what it's like to hold that instrument in your hands. Think about the repertoire that they've practiced. Think about all of the things that go into the psychology of that instrument. Why did they choose the violin? Study repertoire. And when you think idiomatically for the instrument, that's when you're able to bring out more color, make things come alive. And for example, this is nothing crazy, of course, but a very, very small example is that, I've studied violin. I know that this is available as a natural harmonic. It's idiomatic. I have taken harp lessons, so I know that the hands need to be split out this way rather than in one hand, or it's better split out in hands, and I know to exploit enharmonics. But I know this not just from taking lessons, but studying literature and looking at solo literature and seeing the idiomatic things, seeing what's incredibly difficult for the instrument, seeing, what are the things that they just eat up and do so naturally and do so well. So I think, when you can use your intuition and you can use your imagination, but then place yourself into the mind and the hands of that instrument and really think as idiomatically as possible. Know when you're writing, a violin note, if there's a huge leap, know if that's a very awkward string crossing. And if it's an awkward string crossing, maybe as a courtesy, you put in a little bit of an eighth note rest to get over there, to give them psychological confidence that, like, I know that this is difficult for you, and someone else is sustaining below you, so instead of a quarter note and a leap, I'm going to make that an eighth note and give you just a little bit of time psychologically to get to the next note. So really just think about what's easy on the instrument and what's difficult. So this is almost 30 minutes, and this was a lot longer than I was intending to make. But thank you for being patient with me, and I hope that there were some things in here that were helpful to you. So have a wonderful morning or afternoon or evening wherever you are. And as I like to remind people, don't forget to love yourself and each other. Check you in the next one. Thank you so much.